This is how much the debt will keep going up, and like, yeah, the other thing that we should.
Oh, Cindy, it's a very long piece for this week's cover, but it's so interesting because the first thing that caught my eye, right, when I read it, was that fiscal debt as a portion of GDP has gone down, right? It's moderated, right? Which is what the government keeps telling. But the actual amount has not.
There are two things. You remember they always say 3%, 2.8% this year. That's the fiscal deficit.
Okay.
That is the difference between what you earn and what you spend.
Yes.
That actually has moderated from over 6% a couple of years back to 3% last year, and it's projected to fall to 2.8% this year.
But the actual amount?
That's different.
Yeah.
That's the fiscal deficit. And the other thing that's moderating is the debt, federal government debt to GDP, which is the one that is below 55%. It reached almost 55% a couple of years back.
Yeah.
Now it's about 52.
Okay.
So that is also another moderation. So in that sense, the headline metrics looks good, but when you go down to the absolute amount, federal government debt is still very high, and it's not gone down. It's not come down.
All right. And then the worst part is, I like the one thing that you pointed out, which I actually found very, very eye-opening, was that the amount to just pay the debt, you know, the interest technically on your loan is 30.88 billion. And you very, very thankfully broke it down into like the most basic kind of metrics. So that 30.88 billion could pay everybody how much?
Yes, actually almost $1,000 for everyone.
Okay.
Which is a lot of money.
That's crazy. I mean, like, what else? I mean, like, 30.88 billion, how much is it as a percentage of, like, we collect?
That's 13% of government revenue, which I think it's a bit much.
Yeah.
Because that's 4.5 times of BRIM.
Yeah.
And 96% of personal income tax collection.
71%.
And 71% of GST collection. So that's quite a bit of our tax money just going into what you call interest payments.
Yeah, and you're not even touching the actual debt amount.
Yeah.
So you talked to Jomo, who was a professor, and he was saying something interesting, saying that a lot of this amount also doesn't include some of the big ticket projects, you know, the ones that the government keeps talking about, like, for example, the ECRL and all this. Where does it go?
It's what some experts call off-balance sheet.
Okay.
Some of it actually we can see in debt papers issued that are guaranteed by the government. These are only for debt that is directly guaranteed by the government. So you've heard some discussion on letters of guarantees and some of the other types of guarantees.
Instruments or whatever.
Instruments that are not direct government guarantees. Those will not fall under this list. That means there are some unknown to the layman like you and me, of how much debt that's still not recorded. I'm not trying to say that there is a lot more, but
it's not the whole picture, is it?
Yeah, it's not the whole picture.
Actually, and that's why Jomo actually points out, I mean, we already have the PAC, right, which is supposed to oversee all of this, but he is advocating for a more beefed up version of the Public Accounts Committee, right?
He wants the PAC to be more equipped. He would like the PAC chairman to be from the member of opposition, for instance, and for them to be adequately funded and to be well staffed independently, so that they would be able to do their own investigations into large projects especially.
The reason why we're borrowing so much for the infra development is because the actual spending on running the machines of government is already quite high, right?
Yes.
So if you cut that down, then at least the amount of debt you can take for the big projects gets less.
That's a very good point, Nadia.
Yeah.
Because right now, 98% of what the government earns go to operating expenditure, which is basically paying salaries, of course subsidies, pensions and all that. That's the upkeep of the government, which leaves only 2% for development expenditure, which is why we have to borrow and also have all these public-private partnerships and all that to do infrastructure.
To make sure that the country actually grows.
Yes.
Okay, so here's the $1 million or $1 billion, $30.88 billion question. What's going to happen if we keep growing at this rate? If we have to keep borrowing at this rate?
We don't want to be alarmist, but if you do a very simple calculation, a very simplistic one, if you keep growing at about 10% a year, it will only take us 2021 to reach 1 trillion. Because we are already at more than nearly 700 billion already. Yeah.
And then, does that mean more tax collection?
It depends. If we don't cut spending substantially, that could be one way
for them to collect.
Yeah, for the government to increase.
For more on the stories, pick up a copy of The Edge Weekly at all good newsstands.